I've always been an avid fisherman. There's something inherently peaceful about the calmness of the water, the gentle sway of the boat, and the promise of a good catch. I've spent countless weekends exploring different lakes and rivers, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced at Blackwater Lake. This trip still haunts me to this day, and every detail remains etched in my mind as if it happened yesterday. It was a chilly, overcast morning when I decided to visit Blackwater Lake, a secluded spot about 2 hours from my home. The lake was known among local anglers for its abundant fish, but it also had a reputation for being eerie and desolate. Some said it was cursed, but I brushed off the stories as mere folklore. I was eager for a new fishing adventure, and the promise of a big catch was too tempting to resist. I arrived at the lake just as dawn was breaking. The first thing I noticed was the unusual stillness. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, and no sounds of birds or insects. It was as if the entire area was holding its breath. A thick fog hung low over the water, giving the lake an ethereal, almost otherworldly appearance. I launched my small boat and paddled to the center of the lake, the mist swirling around me like ghostly fingers. As I cast my line, a sudden chill ran down my spine. It felt as though I was being watched, but when I scanned the shoreline, I saw nothing but trees shrouded in fog. Trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, I focused on my fishing. Within minutes, I felt a strong tug on my line. Excitement surged through me as I began to reel in what felt like a massive fish. The water around the line started to churn violently, sending ripples across the otherwise calm surface. Just as I was about to catch a glimpse of my prize, the water exploded. A pale, emaciated hand broke the surface, clutching my line. I stared in horror as a ghostly figure emerged from the depths, its hollow eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The spirit of a drowned fisherman, his body decayed and waterlogged, glared at me with a look of pure malice. Panic gripped me as the ghostly figure climbed onto my boat, dripping water and decay. His clothes hung in tattered shreds, and the stench of death and rot was overwhelming. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and I could feel the coldness of his breath on my face. Desperate, I grabbed an oar and swung it at the apparition, but it passed right through him. The spirit's mouth twisted into a cruel smile as he lunged at me, his icy hands wrapping around my throat. I struggled against his grip, feeling my strength ebbing away. Just when I thought it was the end, a blinding flash of light enveloped us. The spirit let out an anguished wail and vanished into thin air. Gasping for breath, I looked around and saw a figure standing on the shore holding a lantern. It was an old man, the lake's caretaker. The caretaker helped me back to shore, and once I was safely on land, he told me the story of the lake. Years ago, a fisherman named William had drowned under mysterious circumstances. Some said he had been pulled under by a monstrous fish. Others believed he had been cursed. His body was never recovered, and since then his spirit had haunted the lake, seeking revenge on those who dared to fish its waters. The lantern the caretaker held was no ordinary lantern. It was imbued with protective powers passed down through generations of his family. The light from the lantern was the only thing that could repel the vengeful spirit of William. As I listened to the caretaker's story, I felt a deep sadness for the tormented soul of the fisherman. I realized that William's spirit was trapped, unable to find peace. The caretaker and I decided to perform a ritual that night, hoping to release William from his eternal torment. We gathered around a small bonfire on the shore, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the trees. The caretaker recited ancient incantations while I held the lantern, its light growing brighter with each passing moment. The air grew colder, and the fog thickened as the spirit of William emerged from the lake once more. This time, instead of malice, there was a look of sorrow in his eyes. He moved towards us, drawn by the light of the lantern. The caretaker continued his chant, his voice rising in intensity. The ghostly figure paused, then slowly began to dissolve into the mist. As William's spirit faded, I felt a sense of peace wash over the lake. The fog lifted, revealing the stars above. The stillness that had once been oppressive now felt serene. The caretaker smiled, knowing that the spirit of William had finally found rest. I left Blackwater Lake that night, feeling a profound sense of relief and closure. The experience had shaken me to my core, but it had also given me a new perspective on the mysteries of the world. Years passed, and the memories of that fateful trip slowly faded into the background of my life. But every now and then, when the night is still and the moon is full, I think of William and the spirits of Blackwater Lake. I wonder if they're watching, grateful for the peace they've found. Fishing has always been my escape. Whenever life got too overwhelming, I found solace in the quietude of nature, with only the sound of the water and the wind to keep me company. Redwater River, with its mysterious crimson tint, was a place I had long wanted to explore. The stories about its eerie color were numerous. Some said it was due to minerals in the soil, while others spoke of darker, more sinister origins. As an avid fisherman, I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. One crisp autumn morning, I decided to venture to Redwater River. The sky was overcast and the air carried a chill that promised winter was just around the corner. The river, hidden deep within a forest, took some effort to reach. When I finally arrived, the sight took my breath away. The water, with its unusual reddish hue, looked almost otherworldly. The dense trees surrounding the river created a canopy that allowed only slivers of sunlight to filter through, casting an eerie glow on the surface. Setting up my gear, I felt a strange energy in the air, as if the river was alive and watching me. I brushed off the feeling and focused on the task at hand. As I opened my tackle box, I noticed a peculiar lure, a silver bait shaped like a tiny human skull. It wasn't mine, and I had no idea how it got there, but I felt an inexplicable compulsion to use it. As soon as I cast the lure into the water, the river seemed to react. The current, which had been gentle, grew stronger, and the water around the lure began to churn. My line was tugged violently, and I knew I had hooked something massive. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I began to reel it in. The struggle was intense, unlike anything I had ever experienced. The water boiled and frothed, and the sky darkened as if the sun itself had fled. Just as I thought I was winning the battle, the thing on the end of my line broke the surface. It was not a fish. It was a grotesque, humanoid creature, its body covered in slimy scales and its eyes as black as the void. The creature let out a blood-curdling screech that echoed through the forest, sending a shiver down my spine. Its claws clutched the silver lure, and it began to pull me towards the water. I tried to cut the line, but my knife slipped from my trembling hands. The creature's strength was overwhelming, and I felt myself being dragged closer to the edge of the river. Desperation took hold, and I kicked at the creature with all my might. My boot connected with its face, and for a brief moment, it released its grip. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, and managed to cut the line with my pocket knife. The creature let out another screech before sinking back into the depths, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. I collapsed on the riverbank, my heart pounding and my mind racing. What had I just encountered? Gathering my scattered gear, I fled back to my car, leaving the strange lure behind. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts consumed by the nightmarish vision of the creature. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's black, soulless eyes staring into mine. The next morning, I decided to seek answers. I visited the local library, hoping to find some clue about the river's dark past. What I discovered was more horrifying than I could have imagined. Redwater River, it turned out, was once home to a small village. The villagers had lived in harmony with the land, but everything changed when a shaman, angered by the intrusion of outsiders, placed a curse on the river. The curse was said to trap the souls of those who disrespected the waters, transforming them into vengeful spirits. The lure I had used, shaped like a human skull, was part of the shaman's curse. It was said to be a powerful totem, a beacon that called forth the spirits from the depths. I had unwittingly invoked the curse, and in doing so had encountered one of the river's guardians. I knew I could never return to Redwater River. The mere thought of fishing there again filled me with dread. I decided to tell my story, hoping to warn others of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface. As the years passed, the memory of that day never faded. The creature's screech, the feeling of its claws, and the darkness in its eyes haunted me. Even now, I can still hear that screech in my nightmares. The curse of Redwater River remains a chilling reminder of the spirits that dwell in the places we least expect. Respect the waters or face the wrath of those who guard them. Lake Erie, ironically named for its tranquil beauty, was a well-kept secret among local fishermen. Nestled deep in the woods, it was a serene spot with crystal-clear waters and an abundance of fish. However, it also had a dark secret that only the locals knew. Over the years, numerous fishermen had vanished without a trace. I had heard the stories, but like many others, I dismissed them as urban legends. That all changed when I decided to spend a weekend there with my friends. We arrived at Lake Erie on a bright Friday afternoon, the sun shining down on the shimmering water. The lake was surrounded by dense forest, creating a natural barrier from the outside world. It felt like we were stepping into a hidden paradise. We set up camp near the shore, excited for a weekend of fishing and relaxation. The first day was perfect. Clear skies, calm waters, and plenty of fish. As the sun set, we gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and laughing. The air was filled with the scent of roasting marshmallows and the sound of crackling wood. It was the perfect end to a perfect day. As night fell, an unnatural fog rolled in, thick and suffocating. It covered the lake like a blanket, reducing visibility to almost nothing. We decided to call it a night, hoping the fog would lift by morning. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by the sound of splashing. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled out of my tent and saw one of my friends, Mark, standing at the edge of the water, staring into the fog. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. He just kept walking into the lake, his movements slow and deliberate. Panic set in as I ran to stop him. I shouted his name, but it was as if he was in a trance. Just as I reached the shore, Mark disappeared beneath the surface without a sound. I dove in after him, the icy water shocking my system. I searched frantically, but there was no trace of him. It was as if he had been swallowed by the lake itself. Desperate and terrified, I woke the others. We searched for hours, calling his name and shining flashlights into the fog, but it was futile. Mark was gone. Exhausted and numb, we returned to our tents, hoping it was all a bad dream. The next morning, the fog was still there, thicker than ever. We reported Mark's disappearance to the authorities, but they found no evidence of foul play. As we packed up to leave, I noticed strange symbols carved into the trees around our campsite, ancient runes I couldn't decipher. Years later, I met an old man who claimed to know the truth about Lake Erie. He told me of an ancient tribe that once inhabited the area, worshiping water spirits. They believed the lake was a portal to the spirit world, and those who disrespected it were taken as offerings. The old man explained that the symbols I had seen were part of a ritual to protect the living from the spirits of the lake. Mark had unknowingly crossed into their realm, and the spirits had taken him. The fog, he said, was a manifestation of their presence, a barrier between our world and theirs. I can still see Mark's lifeless eyes staring into the fog, his face blank and expressionless. The memory of that night haunts me, a chilling reminder of the spirits that dwell beneath the surface of Lake Erie. I haven't been back since, and I doubt I ever will. The story of Lake Erie and the Vanishing Fisherman remains a mystery, one that locals whisper about but few dare to investigate. To this day, the lake is shrouded in fog more often than not, and those who venture there speak of feeling watched, as if unseen eyes are always upon them. I share this story not to scare, but to warn. If you ever find yourself at Lake Erie, remember the symbols and respect the waters. The spirits are always watching, waiting for the next soul to claim. And once you cross into their realm, there may be no coming back. Blackthorn Lake was a place of untold beauty, nestled in the heart of an ancient forest that seemed untouched by time. The water was so clear you could see the fish swimming near the bottom, and the surrounding woods were dense with towering pines and oaks. Despite its picturesque appearance, Locals often spoke of strange occurrences and eerie sounds emanating from the lake, especially at night. They called it the Whispering Depths, and as a seasoned fisherman, always in search of a new challenge, I was naturally drawn to it. One late summer afternoon, I decided to take a trip to Blackthorn Lake. The drive was long and winding, the road barely more than a dirt path cutting through the dense forest. When I finally arrived, the sight was breathtaking. The lake was a perfect mirror, reflecting the lush greenery that surrounded it. There was a peaceful stillness in the air, a quiet so profound it seemed to absorb all sound. I set up my camp on a small clearing near the shore, the setting sun casting long shadows across the water. I prepared my gear and cast my line, eager to see what secrets the lake held. The fish were plentiful, and I quickly lost track of time. Before I knew it, dusk had settled in, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell, a thick fog began to creep in from the far side of the lake. It rolled over the water like a living thing, swallowing the shoreline and reducing visibility to almost nothing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional splash of a fish or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I decided to call it a night and retreated to my tent. As I lay there trying to sleep, I heard it, the faintest of whispers, like voices carried on the wind. At first I thought it was my imagination, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from the lake, rising and falling like the ebb and flow of the tide. Curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped out of my tent. The fog was thicker than ever, swirling around me in ghostly tendrils. The whispers were clearer now, a cacophony of indistinct voices overlapping one another. It was as if the lake itself was trying to communicate, to tell me something. I walked to the edge of the water, peering into the mist. The voices were louder here, but I couldn't make out any words. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing on the shore, partially obscured by the fog. It was a woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her hair cascading over her shoulders. She seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, an ethereal presence that sent chills down my spine. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. The woman turned to face me, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the woman raised her arm and pointed towards the center of the lake. I followed her gaze and saw something moving in the water. It was a small rowboat, drifting aimlessly. Without thinking, I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the edge of the water. The boat looked old and weathered, covered in algae and barnacles. As it drew closer, I saw that it was empty, save for an old, tattered journal lying on the seat. Compelled by an unseen force, I waded into the water and retrieved the journal. The whispers ceased the moment I touched it, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. I returned to my camp and opened the journal, its pages yellowed with age and filled with handwritten notes. The journal belonged to a man named Thomas Caldwell, who had lived in a nearby village over a century ago. He wrote of his love for a woman named Eliza, who had mysteriously disappeared one night while rowing on Blackthorn Lake. Desperate to find her, Thomas had spent years searching the lake, convinced that she was still there, somewhere beneath the surface. As I read on, a chill ran down my spine. Thomas described hearing whispers and seeing ghostly apparitions, much like I had. His last entry was the most disturbing. It detailed a plan to dive into the lake's depths to find Eliza, guided by the voices that haunted him. The final pages were smeared with water stains and barely legible, but I could make out one haunting line. "The lake calls to me, and I must answer. I will find you, Eliza, even if it takes my soul." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The figure I had seen was Eliza, and the whispers were Thomas's desperate attempts to communicate. The lake had claimed them both, trapping their spirits in its depths. Determined to bring closure to their tragic story, I decided to follow Thomas's plan. I donned my diving gear, equipped with a flashlight and a waterproof camera, and waded into the lake. The water was unnaturally cold, sending shivers through my body. As I swam deeper, the whispers returned, guiding me towards an unseen destination.